In this video, we're going to be going over a complete guide to the V Rising Dracula fight. This is the last boss in V Rising. It's incredibly tough, but incredibly rewarding whenever you finally down him. A quick note, this is not the brutal version of the fight. If I decide to do a brutal playthrough, which I think I'm going to, I will update the Dracula fight with the brutal version as soon as I complete it. So again, if you don't know, Dracula is the final V boss in V Rising. You're going to need to defeat Dracula, the level 90 V boss, in order to unlock the remaining items in the game and complete all the quests. This is an incredibly hard fight that takes a lot of patience and preparation. So first things first, in order to enter Dracula's castle, you're going to need to acquire the Blood Key. You can unlock the recipe for the Blood Key by defeating Lord Styx, the Knight Champion. He is located in northern Dunley farmlands, and the point of interest is called Dracula's Demise. Once you have the recipe, you can then make your way to an artisan's table to craft the Blood Key. And in order to craft it, you're going to need to get 3 Onyx Tears, 3 Primal Blood Essences, and 150 Greater Stygian Shards. The Blood Key is actually an amulet that you can wear if you so choose. However, it gives you 75 sun resistance, which you don't need during the Dracula fight. So it's recommended that you wear a different amulet during the encounter, and we'll talk about gear here in just a moment. Once you have the amulet and are geared up and ready to begin the encounter, you can head over to Dracula's castle. The castle is located in the very eastern part of the Ruins of Mortium zone, and in order to enter the castle, you simply need to have the Blood Key in your inventory. You do not have to have it equipped in order to enter. Once you're inside, you're going to make your way all the way to the back where you'll see a portal at the end of the hallway. You're going to interact with the portal to begin the fight, and when you're in the arena, you'll need to jump down and approach Dracula in order for him to step off his throne so you can start the fight. So before we jump in and talk about the mechanics of the fight, I'm going to show you guys what gear and abilities I was running in order to take out Dracula. Obviously, there's many different approaches you can take with your gear and abilities to defeat the boss, but here are the recommendations that I have for you. This is what I ran, and this is what worked for me. So I ultimately ended up going with the Dracula's Shadow Gear. So this Shadow Gear increases your movement speed, which I found to be very, very useful during the fight. It allowed me to avoid some of the mechanics that I otherwise wouldn't have avoided. It does give you physical critical strike chance, which isn't super great because I didn't use just regular attacks a whole lot during the fight. But the movement speed is really why I ended up equipping this gear over some of the other ones. Then we're, of course, running the Phantom's Veil, and then we chose to use the Soul Shard of Solaris. So the Soul Shard of Solaris gives you a chance on primary hit to spawn a Death Knight. This is super useful because it can sometimes distract the boss and help you get away from some of the other mechanics, and it replaces your ultimate ability with Fallen Angel. So Fallen Angel is going to summon a Fallen Angel to fight for you for 15 seconds, and the attacks performed by the Fallen Angel inflict Condemn, which allows you to then deal more damage to that target. So the weapons that I ultimately went with was the Whip and the Reaper. So I utilized the Whip for the first phase because this gave me an additional movement ability, the Aerial Whip Twirl. This ability is also very nice if you need to take out bats in a clump. The mid-range nature of the whip also allows me to get some hits on Dracula fairly easily in between his abilities. And then for phase 2, I immediately switched over to the Reaper. The Howling Reaper ability on this weapon is absolutely excellent for clearing out some of the blood crystals, and we'll talk about what those are here in just a moment. And unlike phase 1, there's several instances in phase 2 where the boss is just standing still, so a well-timed Howling Reaper can be incredibly effective during this phase. And then for the blood type, I went with Rogue Blood again for the additional movement speed. I really enjoyed having movement speed in the fight. It helped out quite a lot. I've heard a lot of other people using Scholar Blood for the reduced cooldown reduction. That would also be an excellent choice in my opinion. And then for abilities, I chose to go Veil of Chaos for the double dash. This is crucial in there for the Dracula fight, or at least it was for me. The double dash allowed me to get out of some situations that I might not have otherwise been able to get out of. Having that additional dodge was huge. I also went with Spectral Wolf and with Ward of the Damned. These two abilities were absolutely lifesavers and made the fight a whole lot easier for me. The reason Spectral Wolf and Ward of the Damned made it a lot easier is because both of these abilities give me a self-heal with some of the jewels that I placed in there. So the Spectral Wolf, whenever it returns to me after the last bounce, it healed me for 95% of my spell power, which was absolutely crucial. And then Ward of the Damned also heals you whenever you absorb a projectile. It's going to heal you for 38% of your spell power, which was absolutely crucial because there are a ton of projectiles in this fight. You're going to be using this ability a lot to block a lot of damage. It's also going to summon a skeleton whenever you absorb an attack, which is very big because that skeleton can then get a little bit of damage in on Dracula, and any damage on Dracula is good damage. This is a fight of patience and persistence. You really just want to chip away at him as much as possible. So having these skeletons, I thought, helped out quite a lot. It also distracted him some, so I could get in some free hits basically whenever he was targeting the skeletons. All right, so now let's talk about the mechanics of the fight. But I do want to point out here, I'm just going to roll the entire fight for Dracula because I feel like from a viewing experience, it'll be a lot more beneficial to you guys if you can watch the fight in real time versus me stopping and explaining every single mechanic. I'm going to go over every mechanic that Dracula has. I'm going to tell you how to avoid them, but sometimes they're not going to match what's on the screen because I'd really like you guys just to see the fight in its entirety. I feel like that'll be a whole lot more useful than me stopping and starting the video over and over again. So there's two phases to this Dracula fight. And again, please note, this guy does not reference the brutal version of the fight. But there are additional mechanics even in the normal version that you're going to face if you decide to take on Dracula with a friend or a group. And I'll explain those as well as we go. Also worth noting is that if you die, you're going to be transported back to the portal, so you don't have to run all the way back to the castle again. Also, when you respawn, your blood pool is replenished to what it was prior to entering the fight. This means that taking one blood bottle or coming into the fight with full blood is usually enough to attempt the fight several times. So during phase 1, after Dracula jumps from his throne, there's going to be a short delay before you can deal damage. If you time this correctly, you can get a little free damage at the start of the fight, and also be aware of the 4 columns in the arena. You can use these to your advantage to block many of the mechanics in this phase. The mechanics you need to be aware of during this fight include the following. So Dracula performs what's called blood waves. He's going to drag his sword on the ground and sling it up towards you. This is going to send out a wave of blood towards your location, and if you're solo, getting hit by this is just going to deal damage. You can easily move out of the way of this, just dash or sidestep, or you can use a block ability to avoid the damage altogether. If you're in a group, you will take damage, and you're also going to receive what's called a vampiric curse. We'll talk about that here in just a second. The boss also performs an ability called Vampire Vortex. So he's going to cast a very large circle that covers most of the area. You can avoid this ability entirely if you're outside of the circle, but most likely you're going to be caught inside. When he performs this ability, he's going to shoot out blood balls in a slow moving circle around him. You're going to need to block or maneuver around those blood balls to avoid taking damage. The circle is going to slowly move inward into the boss. Once it gets fairly close to the boss, you'll see it change colors. When this happens, you need to dash out of the circle in order to avoid taking damage. And if you're caught in the circle too early, you're going to be pulled into the vortex. You're going to take damage as well. So you got to make sure you time this ability appropriately. Dracula's also going to turn into a wolf. So whenever he turns into a wolf, he's going to run straight towards you. And once he reaches you, he's going to lunge towards you and then turn back into his vampire form. Once he turns back, he's going to quickly slash his sword at you, dealing damage. To avoid this mechanic, really just wait for the wolf to get close to you, and then you can dash under him whenever he lunges. This is going to move you away from him and avoid the slash at the end. If you're playing in a group, he will also spawn wolf adds, and we'll talk about that here in just a second as well. Dracula's also going to shoot out 2 blades that cross paths towards you. This ability works much like the ability you can use with axes. You can avoid this ability by backing up out of the range of the axes, or you can utilize a blocking ability or moving forward into the open space. If you get hit by these, it does deal a good amount of damage, so watch out for this mechanic. It is a kind of a tricky one to dodge. Sometimes the blades can also go around the columns if you're not positioned appropriately, so the columns are a little bit tricky to use. If you're going to use the column, you want a blade to run into the column and not go around it, or else you could get hit by the blade, so be careful there. Dracula's also going to summon bats periodically into the arena, so he'll summon a couple of bats, and once they spot you, you will see a red line appear. That red line is where the bat is going to path to. After the red line appears, just move out of the path of the line to avoid taking damage. If a bat hits you, you're going to be damaged. If in a group, you can also receive the vampiric curse by getting hit by a bat. And then there is an additional bat mechanic. This one's called blood drain. So during this ability, Dracula is going to dim the arena, and now a lot of bats are going to appear. When this happens, make sure you save your dodge. Very important. Do not use your dodge until the end of the ability. Just like the bats ability that we just talked about, you're going to need to dodge out of the path of the bats to avoid damage. But at the very end of this ability, Dracula is going to teleport to your location and pick you up. If you get hit by this, he's going to drain your blood pool by a significant amount, and you will take a good amount of damage. So again, make sure you save your dodge. Resist the urge to dodge out of the bat pathing. Only use your dodge when you see Dracula appear to quickly dodge out of his range, unless you have another movement ability stashed away somewhere. This is why I like to use the whip for this phase. The extra mobility that that weapon provides is quite nice if you've already used your dash for something else. And then Dracula performs what I call just an AoE smash. So he's going to smash the ground. There's going to be like these flames of blood that permeate outward in a star shape. You can utilize the columns to block the damage. You can use a blocking ability. You can dodge. You can sidestep out of the way. Just don't get hit by the flames and you'll avoid taking damage from this ability. Then throughout the fight, Dracula's going to periodically dash sideways and then towards your location. Once he reaches you, he's going to chop down with a sword, dealing a good amount of damage. So be ready for this because he covers a good amount of ground and the attack is fairly quick. You can dodge or sidestep out of the way of this ability. He also does what I call a lunge and stab movement. He's going to sometimes lunge towards you and stab his sword into you, dealing damage, and you can dodge or sidestep this attack as well. So during phase one, there really isn't any pattern to any of these attacks. Any of these attacks can be performed at any time, but most of these are only done one at a time. You will rarely see multiple abilities used by him at once. So you'll have time to kind of gather yourself in between abilities. He does dash around the arena a lot during phase one. So there are clear animations for every single attack, and sometimes there's going to be sound cues for several of them as well. So make sure you utilize the columns to your advantage during phase one for line of sight. Don't get too greedy for damage or you will be punished for it. Be patient and deal damage in your window of opportunity once he has completed his attack animations. Once you have Dracula down to roughly 60%, he's then going to hover in the air. After a few seconds, all of the columns around you are going to explode. They're not going to deal damage to you, so don't worry about taking cover. This is actually a great time to pop a potion or take a moment to gather yourself for phase two. So now before we move on to phase two, let's talk about the group mechanics just a little bit. So I mentioned Vampiric Curse a couple of times. So this is a debuff that's going to be applied to you only if you're fighting Dracula with another player or a group. When you're hit by certain abilities, you're going to receive a curse. The curse will show an icon above your ability bar with a countdown timer. This lets you know how long you have until you take damage from the curse. At the end of the timer, the curse will explode and deal damage to you and anyone nearby. You can avoid the damage if you time your dodge perfectly, or you can utilize a cleansing ability in order to remove the curse prior to the explosion. There's also another mechanic that Dracula does. He's going to spawn multiple wolves into the arena whenever he goes into wolf form. He's going to spawn 2 additional wolves alongside him. You really need to kill those wolves or they will eventually overrun the arena. There is no limit to how many wolves he can spawn in the arena at a given time. So you got to make sure you manage those if you're playing duo or in a group. So once Dracula enters into phase 2, this phase is going to get a lot more hectic. There's no more columns to kite around or to utilize for line of sight, and the mechanics are ramped up a good bit. And unlike in phase 1, in phase 2, you're going to find yourself managing multiple mechanics at once. So you have to pay attention the entire fight. This is a long drawn out fight. You got to make sure that you're locked in the entire time. One mistake could end your fight for you. The mechanics you need to be aware of are the following. So he does blood waves in this phase as well. This is the same ability from phase 1, but it has a twist. So Dracula is going to drag his sword on the ground. He's going to sling it upwards to you. It's going to send out a blood wave towards your location, just like in phase 1. But when the wave ends, there's now going to be 2 blood pools on the ground for a moment. These are decent sized AoEs, so make sure you avoid those to avoid taking damage. They will disappear after a few seconds. Dracula also summons blood crystals into the arena. When this happens, there's going to be large blood crystals with a red circle around them. If you are hit by the red circle, you're going to take damage. If you stand in that circle, it's going to continuously deal damage to you. Therefore, you'll want to utilize your dash to dash through the circle and into the safe area. So once you're inside the circle, you're not going to take any more damage. It's only whenever you hit that outer ring. But now that you're in the circle, you need to do damage to the blood crystal in order to destroy it. It's incredibly important that you manage the crystals during this fight because he's going to continue to summon them. If you don't destroy them, then the arena is going to be covered in the crystals. This is going to give you very little room to maneuver, and it makes it almost impossible to dodge some of the other mechanics. So whenever you have an opportunity to destroy a crystal, make sure you go take care of it. Dracula will also clone himself and fly to your target location every now and then, and once he reaches you, he's going to smash down on you with a sword. This is a fairly quick ability, so be ready to dodge out of the way. If you get near the clone, he's going to attack you as well. You can kill the clone if you need to, or keep your distance. He will disappear after a short duration. This is an ability that I had a little bit of a hard time with because sometimes I would take my eyes off of Dracula. I wouldn't see him do the clone ability, so I wouldn't know to dash out of the way. Once he flies up into the air, sometimes it's a little hard to see him, so make sure you keep your eyes on the boss to be aware of that ability. And then we have a blood wall. So every now and then, Dracula is going to launch several blood blood orbs towards your location. As they move towards you, they're going to cross one another's paths and they're going to slightly target onto you. So they're going to hone onto your location. You can avoid these by dashing or moving through the gaps or using a block ability. And then Dracula also performs the bats and the blood drain ability during this phase too. So sometimes he'll summon a couple of bats in the battlefield without dimming the lights and doing the blood drain. And then other times he'll dim the lights and a ton of bats will be summoned into the arena. Same thing as phase one. Just make sure you avoid the bats from taking damage. Save your dodge so that you can avoid the blood drain at the end of the ability. That is the most important part about the bats and the blood drain ability. And then a new ability in phase two is called Falling Swords. So he's going to summon these swords from the sky. So these swords are going to drop down onto your location. You will see the circle appear second before the sword drops. It's going to give you time to maneuver out of the way. And the best way to avoid this ability is to walk along the edge of the arena and don't stop. Just keep moving. If you're caught inside a blood crystal when this happens, you're going to have very limited space to move around. So just try your best to keep moving around the edge of the arena to avoid taking damage from the swords. And then we have the AoE smash and pull. So just like in phase one, we had the AoE smash where he smashes into the ground and these blood flames, if you will, go out from his body in like a star shape. But at the end of the ability in phase two, it's the same thing, but now all of those blood flames are going to leave a pool of blood on the ground that persists for a few seconds. This is a lot of blood. There's like 5 really big pools on the ground. So make sure you're either inside in the center area or outside of those. Don't get caught in one of those pools in order to avoid taking a bunch of damage. And then probably one of the harder mechanics, or maybe the hardest mechanic to avoid in the entire fight, in my opinion, is what we call, or what I call, the summoning circle. He's going to teleport to the center of the arena. And then whenever this happens, he's going to summon these blood balls. They lock on to you. He summons a fiery blood X, if you will, in the middle of the arena as well. That's going to cut the arena into fourths. So you're going to have a very small area to work with. So the best way to avoid taking damage here is to move to the edge of the arena as far back away from Dracula as you can. That way you can see the balls clearly coming at you, so you'll have time to avoid them. If you're very close to the boss, you're going to get hit by a ton of these things and you will likely die. Make sure you are very far back. And then whenever you're very far back against the wall, you're just going to really walk from left to right. Walk as far left as you can. And then whenever you find a gap to weave in between one of the balls, then you're going to turn and walk right as far right as you can. Find a gap, turn, walk left, and you're just going to keep doing that until this ends. Or if you're not doing a very good job at dodging them, make sure you utilize a block ability or something to block those projectiles from hitting you. But as long as you're walking from left to right, this is where that movement speed comes in. This is where it really helped me out a lot, was in this phase. I was able to avoid a lot of these blood balls because I was able to move a little bit quicker with all of the movement speed that I had. So phase two can get incredibly hectic. There's many mechanics happening all at once. You have to make sure you can see the boss at all times so you can avoid the mechanic that's coming next, and also make sure you're managing the blood crystals so the area doesn't get just completely overwhelmed. A great way to approach this entire fight, phase one and phase two, is just keep your distance, be patient. You're going to have windows of opportunity to hit the boss. Don't get greedy with your damage and just chip away at him slowly when the opportunities arise. That's going to do it for this one, boys and girls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope this video helps some of you guys out. Dracula is incredibly hard. It is very rewarding once you finally take this boss down, but it is a very difficult fight. So good luck out there. I hope this helped you. I hope watching the video and hearing the explanation of some of the mechanics helped you out, and hopefully you'll be able to take Dracula down. Good luck. I hope you get him, and thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'd appreciate that a whole lot as well. And I stream every single Wednesday through Friday over at twitch.tv/BDLG. We start over there at about 8 a.m. CST. That's going to do it for this one, boys and girls. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one.